Whom do you think I should ask next? I'm really looking forward to that answer.
Sure, I have a list of people to recommend. So you could also talk to Shane Hastie in New Zealand.
In today's talk, Shane will talk about one, how Desmond Tutu had an impact on his life. Two, why agile coaches should formally commit to the code of ethical conduct for agile coaching. And three, why the way to make the world better is also important. I'm Yves Hanul from Who's Agile. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to my channel. You see a lot of agilists around me on this screen. If you want to hear me interviewing, please click that subscribe button because these are the people that I've invited so far. If you think I'm missing people, let me know in the comments. And that like button, well, if you liked today's interview, don't forget to click it. Although Shane is from New Zealand, I meet him actually almost everywhere in the world except New Zealand because I've never been there or on calls like today. Shane, if I remember correctly, was on the board of the Agile Alliance for quite a while, and I think he's still the lead editor for InfoQ, or at least for the culture and method part. And he also wrote a book about no projects, which might interest you as well. And the rest of it, well, actually, I think Shane can introduce himself much better. Welcome, Shane.
If thank you so much for having me. It's really great to see you again, and sadly not in person, but hopefully one day soon, maybe we'll be allowed to travel again and get together in person, because I've certainly missed that. Getting together with friends and community literally all around the world. Yeah, so my right now I'm back at SoftEd for my day job. I've rejoined SoftEd. I was with them for 15 years.
Mhm.
Um, then I went and joined IC Agile for 5 years, and took on a director of community development role there. Had a wonderful time working on the in that certification space and looking at working with a great community of people building out the learning outcomes, and figured out that I really, really missed the classroom, and it was
Mm.
time to get back to teaching. Yeah, it's different now than that. The teaching is largely remote, like we are here,
Mhm.
and there's a whole lot of things that we've learned about good remote learning, and we've seen a whole lot of really bad remote learning. I've been fortunate to pick up gone through the training from back of the room training, and taken that forward to as a certified instructor for TBR, and also a certified instructor now for the TBR virtual training. So I can teach other trainers how to do good virtual delivery. And the Sharon Bowman has taken those ideas from TBR and given us along with the group of TBR trainers who developed the virtual content, um, good guidelines on how to engage participants remotely. So back in the classroom, and happy about that.
Well, in the back of the classroom, or in the back of your I don't know how to call it, in the back of your study for the people who are in another classroom somewhere. Uh,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and I need to take a mental note to invite you on one of the other projects I've started about remote and hybrid working, because you actually, what I forgot to say in the introduction, you wrote a very nice tip for my tips from the Agile Trenches about the backlog, or maintaining the shape of the backlog, if I remember
Mhm.
correctly,
Yeah.
which I like very much. And so that other book project, we definitely need to talk at some other point. But
Uh,
let's jump into this
Wonderfully happy
one.
to collaborate.
So, for me, the question I like to start with is what is something that people usually don't know about you but has influenced you in who you are?
Ooh, I looked at that one and I thought, what would I say to that? Uh, I'm a New Zealander by birth. and lived here for the first few years of my life. And then as a child, I was 10 years old. My parents went traveling around the world. And after a couple of years, we ended up in South Africa for, and now this was the early 70s, and lived there for 27 years. But living through coming from outside and living in South Africa through the apartheid era, I developed a very, very strong social conscience and was actively involved in the movements looking to change the government in South Africa at that time. And that political activism, it was more social activism, if anything, but that has left me still to this day with a very, very strong social conscience, and that's strongly influenced everything that I've done. And unfairness in any form really hurts. Today, I want to fix the unfairness in workplaces.
If I look at some of the work that you're doing for or with the Agile Alliance around the coaching things, that's where I recognize that same spirit, I would say, what you're doing there around the fairness on how we treat the people that we're coaching, and that activism, if I might call it that way. It's that's a background I totally had no idea of. But I can definitely see how that would influence you. That's for sure. Thank you for sharing this, because that's it's indeed it's something I cannot imagine how that would go living there. But I can imagine if you're coming from another country and then seeing it. Probably from a pretty young age, I would say, if I understand correctly. So that's and typically at an age when we're young, we see a lot more of these things, and we don't always realize or understand why things are happening that way. So I can imagine that.
My influences, and I was incredibly fortunate as a teenager. I actually met and spent a fair amount of time with Desmond Tutu. He was even before he became a bishop, that I was at an Anglican church school and part of that community. And he was definitely a strong influence, and the world lost a great man.
Yeah, wow. Okay. That's yeah, when you say that was influenced, I didn't even realize it was at that level. Wow, thank you. That's incredible to work with such people again. Wow. Thank you for sharing this. I want to go to that next question. So, if you had not been into IT, what would have become of you? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, the career I was seriously interested in before going into IT was to become a gemologist. I worked in the retail industry in jewelry and was enjoyed that and wanted to go down the depth of that industry. So not so much the making of jewelry, but the gems in particular. That's what I'd been thinking about. And then circumstances changed. I went and worked in fast food, and then moved from fast food into information technology. And I realized the other day, it was 40 years ago this month, February 1982, I did my first IT training, COBOL programming.
I'm always surprised when I ask this question, how completely different these worlds are, where people were actually aspiring to be in, or were actually maybe even sometimes active in, and how, like you say, things happen in your life and all of a sudden you're ending up 40 years later in a completely different space.
Yeah.
It's wonderful, and it's nice that for some people it's not always clear what could have become, but for you it looked like that was actually very clear. It was almost destined to be not in IT, I would say, the way you explain it. So it's
Yeah, it was. I was really interested in the field, and then circumstances changed. But I've remained. I My grandfather was a hobbyist geologist. I have all of his collection of geology samples and fossils and so forth from all around the world. So that's it's remained a bit of a hobby, but certainly not the depth that it would have been as a career.
okay. So it's yeah, like you say, it stayed a hobby, so it's not even gone in your life, but it's somewhere. Well, I don't know. It's somewhere there, more or less, part of your life in that sense.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, that's definitely, this is why I like these conversations so much, because it's definitely something I didn't know, and that I'm learning again. Um, the next question is, what is for you your biggest challenge, and why is it a good thing for you?
Ooh, that's a tough one. The biggest challenge for me sometimes, I think, is keeping focused.
Mhm.
I I bounce around ideas a lot, and taking something through to completion, being focused on it, is is a bit of hard work. But building that muscle, building that discipline, um, and yet not losing the joy of um, the shiny object syndrome, I suppose. So living in the balance there. Um, that's definitely a challenge. Why is it good for me? Building that discipline muscle of, okay, yeah, you might not be enjoying this piece of work. It's, there's another thing over there, but you need to take it to completion. Is important.
It's kind of surprises me because, well, it's not that we have a daily interaction, but on the interactions we have, I usually see a person who's really focused on whatever you're trying to do. If it's a presentation, if you're organizing something for a conference or something else, you really usually are really focused to the goal. I remember seeing you facilitating multiple times. You keep track of the time, you keep track of things. So this is something that surprised me, but at the same time, then it shows also why it's a good thing, because you work around it. That's basically what
It's
you're saying.
That's the discipline in action. Is without and it was when I built that muscle, I felt I became more effective in the world. Until then, when I was followed every and didn't have that that ability to focus, I don't think I achieved as much as I do now by. And it is a discipline that I've built. It doesn't come naturally.
Mhm.
Is the thing.
It,
So
it it's something I recognize in a lot of agile people. When I originally discovered agile, and what I see a lot of other people when they discover agile, they think, oh, there is no discipline, or they can just it's kind of they do whatever they want. And actually, the more I look into that, and that's what I'm hearing for a lot of people, this is very disciplined. It's actually
mhm,
much more disciplined than many other things that we have, because you have to release every X time, you have to, whatever you do, you have to create a safety net, and all these kind of things. So yeah, but it's like you say, for many people, and I have the same thing, it's something we need to build around and we need to learn.
yeah,
And for me, this is I think I discovered this thanks to Agile by delivering projects and by delivering things in very small iterations and time and again doing something small. Um, for me, it also allows me, okay, I can look around, do something shiny, but I know that whatever I did before, I finished it, so I can look around and lose a little bit of yeah, time,
Mhm.
but go back and then again focus again, and that's, yeah, that's something that's how it works for me, at least. That's what I see, and I see that in a lot of other people. Okay. um I think that for this next question, I think you come across as somebody who's driven, in the sense that you, like what I said, where you want to achieve something, you work hard to get it. Is that something that is true? Do you recognize that? Do you see yourself a driven person? And if so, what drives you?
The What drives me is that social conscience.
Hmm.
I don't want to be trite. I want to make the world a better place.
Okay,
I
so you want to
believe,
leave the world uh, better behind than you found it, in a way? Is
yeah,
that how?
yeah, very much so. And I really want to make a difference in people's lives. So the motivation for the No Projects book is, in we know the harm that was being done and is done through the project mindset inappropriately applied in product organizations. I got involved in the agile movement because it's about more humanistic workplaces. In my teen and early years, the social responsibility. Uh, I don't want to be, I don't want to make a big song and dance about it. I just want to
Mhm.
make the world better. And
Okay, but at your level, that's what I'm hearing,
yeah,
in the small things where you can change it. And sometimes, well, if you're working
yeah,
for the Agile Alliance, that's already becoming a little bit bigger. If you're writing a book, it's
yeah,
also a little bit bigger than just the projects that you're working on or the clients that you're working on. But still, it's at your level, I would say.
yeah.
Um,
The motivation to join IC Agile for 5 years was very much about lifting that influence, and I really think that the IC Agile learning outcomes that are published in the world are useful, and they're released Creative Commons, so
mhm.
then it's not a proprietary thing. It is, here is something that will be useful. Then there's the certification that goes with it, but that's optional. That's not the goal. The goal is to help organizations achieve better outcomes in more humanistic ways. Uh, at some
And the
it,
way to do it is, like you say, there is also it's Creative Commons. So the way to do it is also important for you. That's what I'm
yeah,
hearing.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's,
It's
yeah.
I Frederick Laloux's work. I want to work in teal organizations. I want to encourage organizations to move towards green and teal thinking. Lalou
Hmm.
puts it very succinctly that, profit is necessary. It's like oxygen. Um, no organization will survive without having profit, but it shouldn't be the driver. It's like
And you
oxygen.
say something similar for the certification, and that's what I'm hearing. Like,
Yeah,
for some people need it, and I see a lot of desire for certification.
yeah,
I definitely think Agile wouldn't be where we are today without the Scrum certification.
yeah,
It drove a lot of things, good or bad. We can discuss about that, but it's definitely made an impact
yeah,
to where we are today with Agile.
yeah.
Okay. Talking about impact, what is then for you the thing that you consider your biggest achievement?
5 children, 7 grandchildren.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's also a huge impact on the world.
I tell the world I'm bald because of 3 daughters and grey because of 2 sons.
Wow. Okay. Well, I only have 3, and I find this already an amazing thing. 5, I cannot imagine, or I can halfly imagine. My parents-in-law, they have 5 children, so I can imagine it more or less, but still,
Yeah.
I cannot yet imagine 7 grandchildren. That's I'm not at that start yet, or at least not that I know.
My coffee mug says it all. My favourite people call me grandpa.
I can imagine. I can imagine. That's
It's
and
they,
were you able to see them a lot in the whole COVID situation?
um, of the 7 grandkids, 3, 4, 5 are close to us, and 2 are in Australia, and we haven't seen them for 2 years, and that's hard.
I can imagine.
Our youngest granddaughter is there. She is now just recently turned 5, and we've
That's
visited
about
lots.
half of her life that she's been into COVID. So that's a long period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at least once a week we get on a FaceTime call, and I read her a bedtime story. So we have the
And
technology is wonderful.
and did that increase because of COVID? If you compare that to before, for example?
Yeah, prior to COVID, we would travel there more frequently. We would go and see them at least 3 or 4 times a year in Australia. It was close enough.
But then between the visits, probably not much.
Not much, no. But now, so probably more regular, yes. Yeah.
I'm asking because I noticed that I call my parents, or maybe the last few months a little less, but in the first year and a half, I would say I would call them much more than I did before, even if they are living rather close by. But yeah,
Yeah.
for similar reasons, we haven't seen each other much. But yeah, it's and like you say, technology helps in that sense. I would not want to imagine this living this way without technology. That's a completely different ball game, I would say.
Yeah. Very, very much so.
Yes, well, we wouldn't also be not having this conversation, and maybe the virus would not have spread as quickly as possible as well if we hadn't I don't know, airplanes and whatever that were going that fast. So yeah, it's completely impossible to realize what it would have been. Well, one of the other questions I'm really that I added in the video edition is the personal agility tip, because I've noticed with most agilists, and you already briefly talked about the fact that you created these habits for yourself, but is there something that you do yourself other than that you want to share?
I have a personal Kanban board.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. I don't manage my personal WIP as well as I should. So if there's a tip, it's have a personal Kanban board and manage that WIP.
Oh, so it also means do as I say, not do as I do, something like that.
Yeah. I know the impact of not managing the WIP limit well. That's if there's a flaw in my application of agility, it's I don't manage that personal WIP limit. But using just a simple Kanban board for the things that I've got, all the many things I have going on at any point, I've found to be really, really powerful.
So visualizing that work that you're doing,
Visualizing all the work, yeah.
and the way because you said I have it, and you kind of pointed to your site. Do I assume it's a physical one?
The physical one up on the border, up on the wall over there.
So is it a correct ID that the WIP limit is the size of the board, in a sense that it's
Yeah. It's A little bit bigger than A4, and the doing box is just the size of a single post-it. And
Okay.
I should Sandy Mamoli designed these boards, and she gave me one a couple of years back. It was a Nomad 8 giveaway at a conference, actually.
But so in that sense, there is a whip limit on the thing that you're doing, one thing at a time, in a
That's
sense.
that's the design there. Yeah,
So
and
that's
I'm
already
bad. I put multiple stickies in the box that's meant for one.
okay. Yeah, but I've seen this as many people doing that kind of thing. But at least you're aware of it, so that's already a good start. But I've noticed also myself that just having the board and visualizing all the projects, that all the balls that are in the air,
Mm.
is helping already a lot. I noticed the moment that I started having my own, and this is for me why I asked about if it's a physical one or a digital one, because indeed the digital one has the bug that it has no limit on the size. For me, it's a feature of the physical one that it's limited in size.
Yeah.
So that's actually something good for people to know. And once you go digital, which in the remote world we're kind of forced if you want to share it with other people, it's much more easy or tempting to go digital, but then we lose that limit in size. And then that brings me automatically to the question about remote work. And you already talked about the work that you did from training from back of the room remote. Is there anything that you can share about remote work that you learned recently?
Yeah, one of the things is, particularly thinking about remote education,
Mhm.
is it is possible to design a learning experience that is as engaging and as interactive as an in-person classroom, but it requires more preparation and it's harder work for the instructor. So building good remote learning is harder than building good in-person learning. So that's the
And
one thing I've learned. But
and
it
is it
works.
harder because we're not used to it yet, or is it just even if you're used to it, it stays harder?
I think it's, even if you're used to it, it stays harder.
Okay.
There's things like the designing the collaboration boards really effectively, whereas in an in-person classroom, you can often get away with just a flip chart and you draw a little picture or you do something on the fly. But
Mhm.
if you're doing it remotely, while some of the tools allow for that, it doesn't have the same impact. So you've got to actually really think about, okay, for this exercise or activity, what am I going to put in there? What would the template be? What would the participants need? And then you also have to, and this is something you instructors should be doing anyway, is thinking about, okay, what's the stuff that's not in the class that I might want to bring in response to questions, and having the material you need for that at your fingertips. Whereas again, in the classroom, you might just draw something up on the whiteboard very quickly, or use the flip chart and a couple of post-it notes, and you can get an idea across. Remotely, there's much more deliberate preparation, I think.
Yeah,
Is a better.
I recognize a lot of what you're saying. It's yeah, I've been my very first way of working remotely was in 2005, and I remember at that time everybody around me said remote and agile it doesn't work, and for me it kind of worked, but
Yeah,
it was a lot of hard work. It meant a lot of things that we normally would not do. And like you say, it's a lot of preparation or a lot of other things that you needed to do. Um, and I see similar kind of things now in COVID. It's a lot more people, well, basically, we're forced to go remote.
yeah,
And some people spend the time and do the preparation and have the tools and invest in the tools. And then, yeah, we're getting there. and other people, they just think, oh, we're going to do what we did before, and then it doesn't work. Yeah, but it's not that simple. It's
Yeah, it's not an easy shift. That conscious, deliberate shift is really important.
yeah, and like you say, it's preparation, it's tooling as well. Of course, again, like we said earlier on, now we have much better tools than we had 10, 20 years ago. So of course, at that moment, was almost impossible to do what we're doing now. But even then, we need to do the preparation. So it's nice to see that, and I like also the fact, I'm not surprised that the whole training from the back of room community made that shift, because for me it's also a very vibrant community thinking about, okay, really about what is the student needing, what is my classroom needing, where a lot of the other training is from basically from the trainer's point of view. What is my message I want to get across, and not so much about how does my student understand what we're talking about, which is for me, yeah, the opposite. Well, like that's what training from back of room is. We flip everything.
Yeah,
So
and it
that's
is totally learner centric. Yeah.
that's the word I was looking for. Learner centric. Wow. Okay. Well, it's clear that you're much more used to talking about it than I am, but thank you. It's and that brings me about learning and everything to a book. What's well, maybe not the last book. What's a book you want to talk about? Is
A book
there?
I'd like to talk about, and I'm busy reading, is Leading Beyond Change by Michael Sahota and Audrey Sahota. Michael and Audrey, really inspirational people in the community, and in that enterprise transformation community, and about very much about your personal journey of change and how that links to the organization. Yeah, it's all about people. The book gives a model that they have put together, looking at that leading beyond and change as three clear elements, and then a whole lot of patterns. So in the IT community, we're used to patterns. In agile, patterns is a thing we look for, and there are patterns for the unlearning reality, getting better results, understanding organizational culture. It's all about the people, some of the paradoxes of power, and so forth. And there's I can't actually tell you at a glance exactly how many patterns there are, but there's more than 30 patterns in this book, and they're defined using that sort of pattern language that we've become used to. Pattern 10.2, from fear and stress to psychological safety, and the key points in that: fear and job stress in typical workplaces impair the abilities of people to function at their best. Well, yes. Psychological safety ensures the blood flow needed by the frontal cortex to support thinking and access to intelligence. So they're going into the brain science stuff as well. And then equal voice results in everyone contributing to make the best decisions possible. So that's just that one pattern. There's 5 pages that talk about that, go deeper into that, and each one of the patterns, they end with a self-reflection piece. What do you think would happen to performance if people did experience greater levels of psychological safety? Do people routinely ask for help from other team members and groups in your organization? Are failures used for learning and growth, or for assigning blame? And what role do leaders play in fostering or impairing psychological safety? So some deep reflective questions associated with every pattern.
Yeah, I've worked with Michael in the past, and I've always loved working and talking with him, because he's indeed a very inspiring person. Yeah, it's and like you say, it's nice that he makes the link back to what I would call the start of agile with the patrons community, and bringing that back, because it's yeah what I like about patterns, and I talked in an earlier conversation with Rebecca Bursbrook about it, is that okay, patterns show the context in which this is applying, and when it's not applying, well, they don't always make it very explicit when it's not applying, but by defining when it's applying, it kind of tells you also when it's not applying, which is something that we sometimes forget in the agile community, that it sometimes looks like, oh, this is always working. Well, no, that's not true. It, like many of the coaches would say, it depends. Sometimes the circumstances make that something is more or less applying. um, and I like that. Yeah, like you say, what Michael and Audrey have been doing is really about these personal questions make people reflect again. When you read the book, it makes you really reflect about your own situation, about the team or the organization you're working in, to see if you understand it. It's not an easy book, I find, because of that.
It's not a light read, and you really want to put the time aside to do the reflections that they're asking you, that they're bringing in at the end of every section. They've got this your turn series of questions that, okay, stop and think. Don't just skim over it. Pause, take the time. So it's not it may be a bedtime read, but deliberate, pace yourself with it.
Mm-hmm. It's
time perhaps.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. One pattern at a time. It's for me, I find these are the the hardest books to read. It's always it's tempting to want to continue reading and not do the exercises or not do the thinking, because there's so much value in these kind of books. But I always know, if I'm tempted to skip, and if I would skip some of these exercises, I would not learn half of, I would not learn a tenth of what I could get out of such a book. That's thank you for sharing this one, because indeed it's a really wonderful book to advise or to tell people to read it.
And on a side note, another book I'm reading, but this is it's not a published one. This is a manual for mental health first aid. As I'm the International Coach Federation has in New Zealand, Australia, there's a piece of work going on where ICF coaches are being offered some mental health first aid training, and I've taken some of that up. So it's been sad reading about some of the mental health stats, and inspiring coming up with it, seeing some of the good advice. And I haven't attended the training courses yet. This is the pre-reading that is necessary. But the stats.
So it's reading that is joined for a course that you then supposed to take, or that you want to take.
I'm going to attend in March, and that will give me the a qualification in mental health first aid, which is not about therapy. It's recognizing when people may be in a state where an intervention would be useful, and how to help them break the cycle if needed, and also knowing where to point people towards for the level of help that they need as appropriate, because mental health is an issue, and COVID has, if anything, exacerbated that.
Oh yeah, definitely, and I think it's also something I see, well, maybe more in the agile world sometimes than in other worlds, in a sense that the good people, like, because we do so much habits, and because we get so much possibilities to do things, is that I noticed that some of the best people might be getting to mental health problems just because they want to do so much good, and they don't always realize, a little bit like what you said earlier, not limiting their own work or not doing too much things, or yeah, and yeah,
burnout and
also
overwhelm is real.
exactly, and yeah, in a waterfallish project, if it takes 9 months, maybe it's harder to get into burnout. But if you're delivering every 2 weeks or every week, yeah, if you don't be careful, then it's very tempting to go into burnout if you don't have the people around you that help you recognize it, if you don't recognize it yourself. So yeah, it's even, yeah, I would say in our industry even more important to do that and to think about that. That brings me actually to for me, what I find the most interesting question is, what question do you think I should also ask, and what's that answer to this?
Okay, and here I'm going to grab onto the topic that you did touch briefly on earlier. What's happening with ethics in agile coaching? So that's the question. Now,
Hmm.
where's the answer? I'm just popping it up on my screen. I think I had it there, of course. The work that Craig and myself and a volunteer group of 32 people. Yeah, so it's certainly not my work by any means. This was a large group of people who came together with a view to addressing what we saw as a significant issue in agile coaching.
Hmm.
If we look at professional coaching, there is a professional body, the International Coach Federation. And if you want to call yourself a coach, if you register with the ICF, one, there is a learning requirement. You have to have a certain level of recognized knowledge. So you can't just join the ICF because I want to join the ICF. You have to have gone through at least some of the training. Then the ICF also has accreditation certification, and that is about not just having the training, but being through a mentor program and having relevant experience. I'm halfway to my ACC credential with the ICF, which requires 100 professional coaching hours and 30 hours of mentorship. Across that period, I've got 50 hours of the experience, 50 logged hours. So working towards that, getting that ACF at this stage, that credential. But with one of the things that you do as a professional coach is you put yourself under the discipline of this body, and you sign and commit to a code of professional conduct. And the ICF
Exactly.
code of conduct has got focus on duty to your client, duty to the profession, duty to society, and so forth. Agile coaching has none of that.
Not yet.
Not yet. Anybody can call themselves an agile coach, which is fine. The knowledge of agile coaching, the competencies of agile coaching, that's pretty well defined. I see Agile, the Scrum Alliance, the work that Lisa Adkins has done, and various others, the competencies of Agile coaching are pretty well understood and defined. So that isn't something that is needed. And the training for those competencies, that's out there with training organizations across the world. And yeah, I have a bias towards IC Agile, but certainly the Scrum Alliance and other bodies have that agile coach training, and the training is pretty good. The application of that knowledge by people varies tremendously. And at the moment, or up until recently, there was no defined code of professional conduct. So this volunteer group, we came together with a view to coming up with a code of ethical conduct for agile coaching. We did it under the auspices of the Agile Alliance,
This is the website and the
That's the
information
website.
there.
Yep. And if you scroll down and if you click on that first blue link there, the Code of Ethical Conduct.
That's
there
one.
is
That's one.
that the one. Yeah, that one. You scroll on down. So there is the preamble. That's the great sketch note that, and to my embarrassment, I've forgotten her name, did for us. And I will remember it shortly.
Sid
Markle did that beautiful sketch note for us. And Sid, forgive me for forgetting your name. And the code itself, 9 broad topic areas, 18 bullet points covering everything from confidentiality and information security, acting within my ability, one that we see violated a lot, introspection and continuing professional development, navigating conflicts of interest, ensuring value in the relationship, social responsibility, including diversity and inclusion, agreeing on boundaries, resisting the abuse of power, and the responsibility to the profession. So we've come up with these statements, these 18 statements in the 9 categories, and the idea is that agile coaches formally commit themselves to it. We actually are, the first line says, as an ethical agile coach, I commit myself to the following. And we've released this as a Creative Commons artifact, and we want people to use it, to take it, include it as part of their coaching agreement with their clients, and say, here are the standards that I want you to hold me to.
Yeah.
Here is what I'm committing to take that, and for organizations that employ agile coaches to include it as part of their engagement. We expect you to abide by this code of conduct. Is the code of conduct perfect as it stands at the moment? No.
But it's better than what we had before,
it's a whole lot
which was
better
nothing.
than having nothing. It's an iterative process. I'm sure it's going to change. It's been wonderful to see the collaboration that happened in producing this. We had volunteers from almost all of the coaching bodies, from the training organizations, from the certification bodies. We're starting to see it showing up in training courses. We're starting to see it's building some momentum amongst the community of coaches that, yes, this is something that matters. We don't have what the ICF has in terms of a registration body and a disciplinary body. Could we get to that point? I don't know. Maybe. Does the community want that? Does the community need that? These are all questions that are out there. The other thing that we've done to support the release of the code is further down on that page, you'll see a list of ethics scenarios. We've taken real situations where the volunteer group had seen this is something that happened, and we've then tried to anonymize it so that you can look at it as a situation and see this is the behavior that responded, that the coach did, and why was this behavior appropriate or inappropriate. And the ones that were really meaty are the gray areas, the things that in one context it might be appropriate, and in another context it will be inappropriate. How do we make that decision to try and give some guidelines? So that example that you've got there, there's a whole lot of things that might help to make this decision, because I can't tell you what is the right behavior in this context. And that's the challenge with ethical dilemmas, is that they are hard.
Yeah, exactly.
And the easy ones are obvious and easy. It's the hard ones where we want people to really stop and think.
Yeah, I like the because we use it at my current client. With we have a big number of coaches, and we use some of these examples to have discussions around ourselves. And like you say, the black and white ones, this is very easy, but it's the gray ones where we then discuss. Is this possible to have this situation in here in this company? And if so, how would we react to that? And even there, we noticed that for some departments this might be a good thing, for others it might be a bad thing, and so well, for me it's about the discussions. It's about,
Absolutely.
and that's the, and like you say, this is the start. So it's good to have these, it's good to have these discussions and to understand it. And yeah, I liked it because it's yeah, it forces you as an agile coach and also as an organization to think what what is the thing that we want us to go forward to. uh, because sometimes, yeah, in the past I heard coaches complaining about clients and stuff like that, and yeah, this actually gives you something to say. Well, it's not just about them. You can also, well, you have a framework that helps you take your responsibility, because
Yep.
that's for me is a big part. It's not enough to say, well, they're bad behaving as a bad client. Okay, but you have a responsibility, or I have a responsibility as an agile coach to
Mm.
say, where do I want to go? And yeah, I think this is, well, a lot what we see in the world. We see a lot of fake information going around COVID. So there is also that. We see the same thing with technologies that can be used for good and for bad things, and what do we want to support? And the same thing can be done on said with agile. It can be used to create good or bad companies, and
Yep.
to, well, to abuse it for yeah, wrong power trips from managers and whatever. And that's the kind of thing that I would like to avoid, at least.
Mm.
So
Absolutely.
so thank you for bringing that up. I didn't even think about it up front, so that's why I had to scroll also a little bit to find it. But I'm glad that you brought it up, because it's good indeed to do that. It's nice that we can bring that up. That brings me to actually the real last question. Who do you think I should ask next? Do you have one or multiple people in ID?
One person that jumps to mind, because she is a good friend and is one of the unsung heroes of the agile community, Sharon Robson, based in Australia, in Brisbane. Um, been quietly working away, doing a phenomenal amount of stuff. She's now founded her own organization, Enterprising Agility. She's truly a deeply experienced enterprise level transformation coach, having worked in that space in a number of large Australian organizations. But she doesn't get the visibility that she warrants, that she deserves, and she's just an amazing person who's doing great things in the community.
Well, that's exactly the kind of people that I would like to show more in Who's Agile. There is part of that. Okay, we what I've noticed in the last couple of conversations is that sometimes we forget about the big names of the last 10, 20 years, because the younger people don't always know. So it's good to bring people back with have a history in Agile. Let's put it like this. But at the same time, it's also good to put a spotlight on some of the other people who are quietly working in their little corner, I would say,
Mm.
that actually deserve to be seen. So thank you for that invitation. I hope that she will accept, and that we can have that kind of conversation. If people want to contact you and know a little more about you, where could they find some more about Shane?
I'm on LinkedIn as Shane Hastie, Twitter as @ShaneHastie. So pretty easy to find, and yeah, just reach out to me on either of those. Happy to respond.
Yeah, that's definitely something I would say, that you're rather responsive on social media in general, I would say. and on conversations like today. I would like to thank you for your time. It's we didn't take a full hour, which is actually, I think, okay, because I think it's good to not have too long conversation, but still, it's been a nice time to have this conversation. And like you said earlier on, I hope that the next time we can actually see each other somewhere at an agile conference or somewhere at the bar after a conference, something like that.
It's been an absolute pleasure, and yes, I really look forward to one day again being with you in person.
Thank you very much, and yeah, let's see each other back again. Bye bye. Thank you for watching Who's Agile, where the stories of agilists come to life. I hope you liked today's interview. Subscribe if you're not subscribed and want to get to know other agilists.